The wind carried dust the same way it carried old, tales gentle, unhurried, and yearning for an ear willing to catch them. Caleb Wyrick rested his shoulder against the doorframe of his ranch house, his sleeves pushed past the elbows, his hands rough and stiff with dried sweat and bits of hay clinging to his skin. The sun had settled behind the cottonwoods, laying a soft, golden quiet across the land, the kind that made every living thing, bird, man, and even the weight of memory, pause as though the world itself were holding a breath. Caleb reached down and scratched behind the ear of Amos, his aging cattle dog whose muzzle had gone almost entirely white with the years. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes half closed, as Caleb stared out toward the broad edge of the horizon, studying it like it owed him truths it had never once offered. He lived alone, not from heartbreak or catastrophe, but simply because time had a habit of sifting life until only the stubborn or the sacred stuck around. Caleb, through no plan of his own, had become a little of both. That evening, as the gold dimmed into a deeper dusk, a stir of movement slid through the long shadows stretching across the pasture. 3 figures on horsebacks, deliberated, advanced without secrecy but without haste. Their silhouettes told their story long before their faces did. Comanche riders. One man, older, his features sharpened by a lifetime of storms and seasons. 2 women beside him, one riding a touch ahead with a quiet certainty, the other casting small, measuring glances at the world around them as though she were weighing it piece by piece. Caleb stepped off the porch, boots thudding against the packed earth, though he made no move toward the rifle leaning by the door. The older rider brought his horse to a calm stop and dipped his head in a gesture both respectful and unforced. "I am Tacoma," he said, his voice worn smooth like water-shaped stone. "These are my daughters, Sanya and Amora." Their names drifted into the cooling air and held there, delicate and suspended, like beads strung on a single, unbroken thread. Caleb offered a curtain nod. "What brings you?" The chief dismounted with care. Not war, not warning, just a man watching another man live alone too long. Caleb's throat. He felt the words go in deeper than they should have. "We come with an offer," the chief continued. "You've no woman, no fire inside. She who motioned to Sanya is willing if you are." The silence that followed felt holy. Sanya didn't step forward, didn't smile. She simply stood, shoulders squared, dark hair braided in a single thick rope, eyes like weathered leather, guarded, deep, and quiet. "I don't need clarity," Caleb said low. "It's not clarity, it's choice." The wind blew again. Caleb's fingers flexed around nothing. He nodded once, just once, but not in agreement. More like surrender, toe a question he never thought he'd have. Tones. They left without another word, setting camp down by the dry creek bed a few ridges east. He watched their silhouettes disappear like dusk eats their day. Next morning, a pile of kindling gappered beside his porch, stacked clean and dry. A folded cloth rested on Amos sniffed it and wagged his. Caleb didn't say a word. On tethered morning, he found a satchel of ground corn. A stitched border ran along its edge. Comanche symbols, stars, and he ran his hand along the cloth like it might answer him. Sana never necked, never approached. She would appear with the dawn, walk the fence line, place something down. Then vanish before he could find the words that might make sense of her silence. But Caleb noticed he was shaving more, brushing his shirt clean, leaving his door slightly ajar when he used to keep it bolted tight. These were note admissions, but they were gestures. One morning, Amora remained behind, younger, curious, with a mischief barely hidden. "She won't ask again," she said plainly. "Not because she's proud, but because she is tired of begging in silence." "I never said yes," Caleb replied. "You never said no." That night, a cold sweat, not the kind that bites, but thickened that creeps. Caleb looked at the hearth and realized he hadn't lit it in days. Something in him had already started warming without firewood. He walked to the window. Outside, Saya was walking toward the ridge, moonlight catching the edge of her shore. She didn't turn around. The next day brought 3 wagons from town. Neighbors, men who once called Callie brother, now looked at him like he'd gone soft in the skull. "You talking one off the men?" One asked loud and laughing. "Were they talking you in?" Another spat. "Didn't figure you for a Comanche lover. Caleb thought you had standards." Caleb said nothing, just stared them down. They chuckled and rode off. Dust rising behind, their backs like cowardice won wheels. Sonia had heard every word. She stood behind the barn, eyes lowered but face unreadable. That night she didn't come. The morning after, neither did. The ranch felt colder than it would have. He tried to go about chores, but the water tasted like tin. The sky looked pale. He missed Herstellans, missed her hands that never touched, but somehow fixed everything she left behind. He walked to their camp. Only Chief Tacoma was there, smoking something sharp. "She will not return unless you bring her back." The chief said, "I said nothing wrong." "You said nothing. Sometimes that's worse." Caleb didn't answer. He turned and walked home alone again. The storm cometh at night, howling winds, rain slicing, lightning carved across the fields like ancient scars. Caleb ran out, checked the stables. He saw fire, real fire, coming from the Comanche camp. He gulped down, mud flinging up into Histieth. Their tent had collapsed, half burning, half drenched. Sonia was dragging her father from the flames. Amora screamed. Caleb leapt from his horse, pulled a beam off the side, tore through fabric, and found Naya clutching a shawl around her sister. Her hair was soaked, face stir with smoke. Butch wasn't crying. He grabbed her hand. "You shouldn't be alone in a storm like this," he said. She looked at him. He wasn't alone. "You just hadn't arrived." He didn't answer, just wrapped his coat around her shoulders. His fingers slingered. Together they rebuilt the... Not perfect, not warm, but... That night he sat beside her under-patched canvas while Chief Tacoma slept. His breath shallow but steady. Sonia whispered, "They don't want me where you come from." "I ain't even sure he want me where I come from." She turned toward him. Not close. Just turned. "You're not a fire someone gives, Hess. You're a fire someone earns." He felt her hand brushes. Not on invitation, but in permission. He didn't kiss her, but he might as well have. The next morning, the sun rose, heavy. Caleb walked back to the ranch, fetched a box. Inside a ring his mother had worn through to wars and once a rowful life. He returned to the camp. Chief Tacoma sat up slowly. "I didn't say yes before," Caleb murmured, "because I didn't understand what I was being offered. I do now." The chief studied him, then nodded at once. Sanya emerged from the trees, drying her. She wore the shawl again. Caleb sold one. The edge was patched with thesum stitching as the corn satchel. She approached, no smile, no question. Healed out the ring. She didn't take it. Instead, she reached for his hand, guided the ring onto her own finger, and said only one word. Now they stood in silence. Amos barked once, a single crack of joy in the stillness. That night, she stood on Caleb's porch, watching the moon rise over the farage. He came out carrying 2 mugs of boiled coffee. They didn't toast. They didn't speak. They just stood. And from that silence, something true began, something no one else had to understand. Not every love is loud. Some come like snow and spring, unexpected, quiet, and full of life. Sometimes it's not about finding the right person. It's about recognizing the quiet strength of Semayan, who keeps showing up even when the world tells her not to. And if you're lucky, one day you'll learn what Caleb did. That fire doesn't beg to be seen. It waits until you finally see it. If this story warmed something quiet in you, share it with someone who still believes in slow love, quiet strength, and second chances. Let us know have you ever met someone what changed your silence into warmth? Subscribe for more Wild West tales. Thaterent, just about guns and grit. Butte about hearts, hope and healing under the open sky. One story, one fire every